But let's be honest here, a nosebleed, especially a double nosebleed, is kind of like a badge of honor in a powerlifting or strongman competition. Surely gets me fired up to hit another PR. Vigorous Steve here. In this episode of Worth It or Not, we're going to discuss 4 methylated esterless injectables, which due to their chemical composition should actually be taken orally. We're going to rank them from least sustainable to most sustainable. In this video, we're just going to discuss Methyl-Testosterone, also known as Metribolone, Methyl-Testosterone or MENT, also known as Mibolerone or chick drops, Masteron, also known as Superdrol, one of my favorites, and Metyl-Testosterone. The tried and proven Dianabol, which is one of the most popular oral steroids that everybody knows about. I didn't include Dianabol in the previous video where I discussed Proviron and Dianabol, Anavar, and Winstrol because that video was already way too long. So we're going to discuss Dianabol in this video way at the end. If you only care about Dianabol, use the timestamps to skip ahead. In this video, I'm going to exclude Methyl-Testosterone, methyl dihydrotestosterone, as well as Methyl Nandrolone, because I can't find any anecdotal evidence or reports from bodybuilders or anybody else in the fitness community that people use these orals for their bodybuilding or fitness aspirations productively. Now, I understand that Methyl Nandrolone, also known as Nalvar, was commonly used in the past before other oral steroids came into the market and were favored over Nalvar. So there are some anecdotal reports from old schoolers, and I can't really find any sources that carry norethindrolone, Nalvar, or Methyl-Testosterone, or methyl dihydrotestosterone, also known as Masteron, which is actually a metabolite of Anadrol, oxymetholone. When you take that orally, oxymetholone metabolizes into Masteron, so you get a little bit of a methyl dihydrotestosterone for free when you take your oxymetholone orally. So I just want to leave them out of the Worth It or Not video series because, again, I can't find any anecdotal evidence that they're worth using, nor can I find any source that carries them. I'll discuss Masteron when I review whether Anadrol is worth it or not, or in which context Anadrol can be used. And that's going to be the same video where I discuss halotestin. And honestly, it's a little bit difficult to group these orals because some of them are testosterone derivatives or dihydrotestosterone derivatives or 19-nortestosterone derivatives. Some of them are methylated, some of them are chlorinated, some of them are fluorinated, and then some of them have an ester attachment, for example, primobolan acetate, which I probably have to group into the Anadrol, Masteron, and halotestin video. Again, those 4 are available, and then we have a lot of other compounds which are not really available or can be classified as prohormones or just completely off the map, but still might have some practical applications in the very extreme and rare case that anybody's able to source them. So bear with me. I'm going to do my best to cover the large majority of them, just like I covered the large majority of the injectables, which have some promise and some sort of practical application, even if it's very, very limited. So before we get into the methyl Tren, methyl MENT, methyl Masteron, and Methyl-Testosterone, methyl EQ, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Hit that freaking notification bell button so you can get spammed whenever a new video drops. Let's start with Methyl-Testosterone, also known as Metribolone, also known as Methyl-Trianolone, which apparently has 2 variants, Dimethyltrianolone, also known as RU2420, which is said to be a more potent, more anabolic, more androgenic than Methyl-Trianolone itself. And there's also Tri-Methyltrienolone, abbreviated to TMT, also known as R2956, which was one of the earliest anti-androgens discovered and developed. So Tri-Methyltrienolone really has no practical application or merit in the context of bodybuilding or other strength sports. Dimethyltrienolone has been used as a gold standard reference point in some of the Hirschberger's bioassays to determine the anabolic to androgenic dissociation, which in my opinion is very, very flawed to extrapolate any kinds of information regarding how anabolic or how androgenic a particular compound is. Still, the anabolic rating of dimethyltrienolone is 10,000 plus, and its androgenic rating is also 10,000 plus. I believe that both the anabolic and androgenic rating of dimethyltrienolone is purely calculated based on paper, not through an actual rodent model following the Hirschberger's bioassays. These guidelines are kind of flawed because they allow for too much variability. And when you look at this androgenic and anabolic rating of 10,000 plus, it's because they don't measure over 10,000 or don't calculate over 10,000 based on the original guidelines of the old school Hirschberger bioassays. And that being said, apparently the anabolic rating of Methyl-Trianolone is 12,000 to 30,000, and its androgenic rating is 6,000 to 7,000. So even though the gold standard using dimethyltrianolone, an anabolic to androgenic rating of both 10,000, and that's the upper calculatable limit, somehow methyltrianolone has a higher anabolic rating of 12,000 to 30,000. How that's possible, I'm not exactly sure, but again, these Hirschberger bioassays haven't really been used for anabolic androgenic steroids since, well, the early 70s. So take it all with a grain of salt. And who knows, let's speculate a little bit. Let's sprinkle in a little bit of bro science. Adding in another methyl group, making Tri-Methyltrienolone, actually provides an anabolic to androgenic rating of minus 10,000. All right, let's just focus on Metribolone, methyltrianolone. In which context is it actually useful? Which kinds of people, in what situation can you use methylated Trenbolone, and what kind of magical effects can you expect? Whether you take Metribolone at 1 milligram per 1 milliliter or 2 milligrams per 1 milliliter, these formulas are all taken orally. You can take Metribolone regardless of the concentration sublingually to increase its bioavailability, and then again wash that down with grapefruit juice to inhibit the cytochrome P450 enzymes, preventing the breakdown of Metribolone on the first pass through the liver, increasing its bioavailability so you get more bang for your buck, whether you use 1 milligram or 2 milligram, which seems to be the commonly used dose, right before a competition or right before a max out attempt. And it's only used in this context. Again, these are not sustainable compounds. Metribolone is used only once, guys, and then it's not touched until the next competition or the next max effort attempt. You don't use Metribolone consistently. It's a one dose serving of 1 to 2 milligrams, either sublingually or orally through the conventional route. I do understand that there's injectable Metribolone out there, dosed at 1 milligram to 2 milligram per 1 milliliter concentrations, which, in my opinion, you should stay clear of, because that is usually brewed in synthetic carrier oil, whether that's glycol or polyethylene, monoethylene glycol, whatever synthetic carrier oil these underground labs use nowadays. Metribolone is highly toxic by itself, and you really don't want another synthetic solvent on top to potentiate even more toxicity to the point your liver is going to melt. So just stick with oral Metribolone, ideally sublingually in a single dose of 1 to 2 milligrams, and then you go on a vacation. Hopefully you've won your meet or you've accomplished your max effort attempt. Again, this is all in the context of powerlifting and strongman. You get the job done and you leave this compound alone for your body to detoxify, for your central nervous system to recover. So you're going to be taking some time off after this meet or max effort attempt, and you leave the Metribolone out of your protocol for weeks, if not months. And the same is true for Mibolerone, Methylated Testosterone, brand name Check Drops, or Masteron, single use only. But the dosages are going to be half, maybe 1/4 of Metribolone. Mibolerone, you dose around 300 to 500 micrograms only. Fun fact about Mibolerone is that it's actually available as a veterinary medication under the name Check Drops and Masteron, prescribed for female dogs in heat. So this compound works very similarly to Testosterone, or what Testosterone MENT was developed for, as a male contraceptive, and Mibolerone is a veterinary contraceptive to ease the symptoms of a bitch in heat. Are you a bitch in heat? I didn't think so. Still, Check Drops have their practical applications for a competition involving strongman or powerlifting or another strength sport, dosed in a single dose of, let's say, 300 to 500 micrograms on the day of the competition or the max effort attempt. Now, I believe that both oral Metribolone and oral Mibolerone have a relatively short half-life of about 4 hours, so you would need to dose these compounds reasonably close to the max effort attempt or the competition. And if you're doing a strongman event with multiple competition spaced out over the day. You really have to pick and choose for which event you need to dose the Metribolone or the Mibolerone orally, because the timing is quite narrow. Now, when you go with the anecdotal reports, whether that's Metribolone or Mibolerone check drops, everybody pretty much says the same thing. Incredibly heightened aggression, which is good for competition, setting PRs, incredibly high blood pressure, which in most cases you can mitigate with a telmisartan or another ancillary to control your blood pressure. But let's be honest here, a nosebleed, especially a double nosebleed, is kind of like a badge of honor in a powerlifting or strongman competition. Surely gets me fired up to hit another PR, which is all followed by extreme lethargy after this single administration, this one single dose of a Metribolone or Mibolerone has metabolized and all of the PRs have been set. After that, you need a significant amount to detoxify because, again, the liver stress that Metribolone and Mibolerone potentiate is substantial. Now, let's be fair again, strongman and powerlifting, besides the Metribolone and the Mibolerone, they're probably also using Anadrol or Superdrol or Trenbolone, right? Whatever they need to get as freakishly strong as possible in the windy event. A single dose of Metribolone or Mibolerone puts you out of commission for a while. I don't see any practical applications for bodybuilders because these compounds are not sustainable, but they do have their merits and place in strongman or powerlifting or other strength-based events. So let's move over to methylated Masteron, Methylated, also known as Superdrol, which does have practical applications for bodybuilders, either in the context of breaking through strength plateaus, where you use Superdrol for maybe 2 weeks in duration, ranging at dosages ranging from 20 to 30 milligrams taken sublingually, all pre-workout or spaced out over the day on your rest days to keep your androgen load and intake consistent, either once per week to bring up weaker body parts as a protocol to improve weaker body parts. I already made a video about that. I'll link it at the end of this one, where you dose Superdrol once per week to bring up this lagging body part. And then, of course, there's continuous use leading into a bodybuilding competition or photo shoot for that matter, where Superdrol is used to improve hardness, density, and fullness. And this might be in combination with Anadrol or halotestin or another oral of choice. Just keep in mind that Superdrol is also highly liver toxic. You will see your liver enzymes, both the ALT and AST, go over 100, if not 150 units per liter if you use Superdrol every day. That's why we limit the exposure duration to only 2 weeks, whereas with Anadrol you can use it up to 4 weeks. And I know people, several IFBB pros who ran Anadrol for 14 weeks in duration, so it's no wonder they got all kinds of digestive issues forcing them to retire. Superdrol needs to be respected. 2 weeks in duration at the maximum, at dosages ranging from 20 to 30 milligrams, ideally 20 milligrams if you're combining this with halotestin. Reduce the liver stress by taking this compound sublingually, and even then, liver enzymes will be very, very elevated the longer you use it. So once per week, maybe leading up to 8 weeks in duration, so that's 8 dosages, that's very close to a week of continuous Superdrol use. You really want to limit your exposure to this compound, even though it's more sustainable than Metribolone or Mibolerone for that matter. Superdrol will give you strength acutely, just like Anadrol gives you strength acutely, albeit on a milligram for milligram dose or a molecule for molecule basis. I feel that Superdrol is more potent than Anadrol in its muscle building effects, but also in its strength increases. So we can say that Superdrol is about twice as potent as Anadrol, even though that's a bit of a bro-science-y statement. But Steve, what about protein expression? Every anabolic androgenic steroid expresses protein at the same rate. That's not the full story, baby. Plus, experience, especially when you're a bodybuilding coach, experience from a bodybuilding coach will always trump scientific evidence that hasn't been performed on bodybuilders. Just keep in mind that we're all using these compounds for off-label purposes or completely illegitimate and illegal purposes because they're not FDA approved, they're not used in medical settings, and certainly not at the dosages that we tend to use as bodybuilders. And to say that the accrual of new muscle tissue is solely dependent on androgen-mediated protein expression and protein synthesis within the skeletal muscle cell, get out of here, go back to PubMed, learn some basic human biology. Androgen-mediated gene transcription is only one part of the process of building new muscle tissue, and you need to optimize everything. So when I say that Superdrol is twice as potent as Anadrol, you can bet your left testicle that you get exactly that. Now, regarding its unique characteristics, you can say that Superdrol is relatively close to the unique characteristics of Masteron, albeit in combination with the unique characteristics of Anadrol. When you look at methylated Trenbolone, Metribolone, or methylated Testosterone, Mibolerone, or methylated Boldenone, Dianabol, their unique characteristics are vastly different from its parent compounds. In these three cases, methylation or 17-alpha alkylation changes the pharmacodynamics almost entirely. So you get very different results with Metribolone, Mibolerone, or Dianabol compared to Trenbolone, Testosterone, or Boldenone. But the effects of Superdrol resemble the effects of Masteron more closely, besides the fact that Masteron is known to make you flat. Masteron acts as a reversely binding aromatase inhibitor, reducing the conversion of testosterone into estradiol. Masteron reduces sexual binding globulin concentrations quite severely, especially at higher dosages. And Masteron can also inhibit estrogen-mediated gene transcription, or at least in breast tissues. Now with Superdrol, there's no documented cases of these unique characteristics of Masteron occurring. But that's also because Superdrol was never FDA approved. Masteron and Anadrol was FDA approved and used in clinical settings. Masteron has long since been discontinued, but there's still a lot of scientific evidence that we can review. But with Superdrol, that's not the case. So there's very limited scientific evidence and studies, literature that we can review. Still, if we go by anecdotal reports, Superdrol has the quote-unquote dryness of Masteron without the flatness. Superdrol seems to give comparable fullness to Anadrol without the subcutaneous water retention or the potential for gynecomastia if you're prone to it. Again, Anadrol is speculated to interact with the estrogen receptors, and Superdrol does not potentiate a similar effect. So you get the fullness of Anadrol, certainly more full than a comparable dose of oxandrolone, Anavar, with the dryness, the leanness of Masteron, making Superdrol almost the perfect pre-contest drug, especially for the last 2 weeks leading into a contest or photo shoot. Assuming that you're shredded, Superdrol will make you dry, full, hard, dense, and separated. Unfortunately, you can't run it for long because, again, it's very hepatotoxic, and you really need to stay on top of your TUDCA, your injectable glutathione, your NAC, and everything else that you need to do to ensure liver health. Also made a video about that, so make sure you watch that at the end of this one. Superdrol, 2 weeks at best, 2 weeks at maximum, unless you're using it 1 time per week to improve a lagging body part, in which case you might be able to stretch Superdrol exposure to 8 weeks at maximum. Again, do your blood work before, during, and after, so you can keep track of your liver enzymes and your gamma GT levels, so you can keep track of your health and pull the plug on your Superdrol protocol when your liver health gets out of whack. And it brings us finally to Dianabol, methylated boldenone, also known as methendianone or meth-androstenolone. Dianabol has its loyal supporters, just like Testosterone MENT has its loyal supporters, or the people that really love dihydroboldenone. Personally, I don't think Dianabol is worth it at all, but that's just my personal preference, so don't listen to me. We're still going to discuss if Dianabol is actually worth it or not. Personally, for me, considering all of the options that we have, Anavar, Superdrol, Anadrol, I really like those compounds a lot more. I don't see a reason to run Dianabol, considering that it converts into methyl estradiol, which seems to be metabolism resistant and doesn't fulfill the same physiological functions as bioidentical estradiol does. Still, there's only one oral anabolic androgenic steroid that actually makes you feel good. The 3 before mentioned makes you feel like shit. Metribolone, Mibolerone, and Superdrol not only makes you feel aggressive and irritable, but also makes you physically sick with prolonged exposure. Now, the first 2 you only want to expose yourself to for 1 day, and Superdrol 2 weeks at maximum. But Dianabol actually makes you feel good. Really, there's no other oral steroid that actually puts you in a good mood like Dianabol puts you in a good mood. Testosterone and Dianabol are probably the only 2 compounds that actually are mood increasing, while all the other steroids are kind of mood decreasing until you get to the gym and you set PRs left and right and you have this positive aggression that really helps with your mindset. Dianabol and perhaps testosterone you can consider as a steroidal antidepressant. So there is something to say for Dianabol in the context of using it during a cutting phase or contest prep when you're a little bit down and low and you're not in a good headspace. Even 10 milligrams Dianabol can mitigate some of that. Now, ideally, you use Dianabol during the off-season, again, similar to how Superdrol or Anadrol is used to break through a strength plateau, in which case the pumps that you'll get, assuming that you're already decently strong and eating in a caloric surplus, the pumps that you get from Dianabol, juicy. That's probably the best way to describe them. Your muscles will look super hydrated, really pumped. Dianabol doesn't really make you look dry and hard like Superdrol does or Anavor does. It makes you look like a track and field athlete with very juicy and athletically looking muscle. And this is probably the only overlapping effect that it has with Boldenone. It's non-methylated parent hormone. When you compare Boldenone to methylated Boldenone, being Dianabol, I feel that both of these compounds make you look athletic, with nice, round, full, and juicy-looking muscles that appear to be hyper-hydrated. And whether you use Dianabol during the off-season or even during a contest prep, I know several people who prefer to do their loading protocol on Dianabol. Again, it restores a little bit of estradiol in the form of methyl estradiol, contributing to fullness. And there might be some practical application even in the context of a contest prep as well. Again, you really need to be on top of your aromatase inhibitors because, again, Dianabol converts into methyl estradiol. It might be able to restore some of the fullness if you end up really flat or if you have to make a weight class, in which case testosterone suspension, like we discussed in the suspensions, worth it or not video, might be more suitable compared to Dianabol, but the added benefit of Dianabol is that there's no post-injection pain like there is with testosterone suspension. Again, I feel that for loading purposes, testosterone suspension is superior compared to Dianabol, but I completely understand if you want to go with Dianabol instead. Regarding its fullness restorative effects, comparing testosterone suspension to Dianabol taking sublingually or orally, I would say that the effects are very comparable, assuming that you're still using a method to control the aromatization. Again, you don't want a hypercharged estradiol or a hypercharged methyl estradiol floating around, just a sufficient amount to contribute to fullness after making weight and reintroducing the carbohydrates. I would say that the end results are going to be very comparable, but one will give you terrible post-injection pain and the other one does not. So Dianabol might be a suitable replacement in this unique instance. Besides that, I don't believe in a Dianabol kickstart. I already made a video about that. And I don't believe in a Dianabol-only cycle or using Dianabol as a replacement for testosterone in a Nandrolone-only cycle. Dianabol and methyl estradiol doesn't give you the same effects as testosterone and estradiol, which are both bioidentical, right? So keep that in mind. I understand there's a lot of supporters for a Dianabol base and using Nandrolone on top, or using Dianabol to get some sort of estradiol fulfillment in the form of methyl estradiol when you use Nandrolone as your sole anabolic compound, in the context of not getting any hair loss because there's no testosterone or dihydrotestosterone in this picture. And again, in my personal and humble opinion, I would say that Dianabol is not worth it, especially considering all of the other options that we have at our disposal. Still, Dianabol has its loyal following, just like MENT and DHB has its loyal following. So don't take it personal. Let us know down below in the comment section how much you love Dianabol or how much you despise Dianabol. No hard feelings, regardless of the direction you might choose. Let us know down below in the comment section. Whatever oral is your favorite, make sure you have liver support in place. Whatever oral is your favorite, make sure you have a blood pressure cuff in the form of an Omron 7. Link down below, you can purchase it on Amazon. Regardless of which oral you might choose, stay on top of your health by checking your blood work parameters. If you reside in the United States, you can use my panel over at Merck Health. Use code Vigorous for 10% off. We'll leave it here. In the next video, we're going to discuss Anadrol, its metabolite, Masteron. I will also discuss halotestin and oral methanolone acetate, Bayer Rimabolin S, produced in Japan. Stay tuned for that one. It will probably drop next week. And you can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the description section. Have a look at some of my sponsors and affiliates. Use the discount codes so you can save yourself some money while shopping online. I have more affiliates on my website, vigorsteve.com. Head over to the articles section if you're in the mood to read about anything related to bodybuilding. There's a ton of free articles there. Bookmark that site. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VigorSteve. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. Much appreciated, much love. Occasional check drop use once or twice in my life. Decent amount of Superdrol experience and hit and miss experience with Dianabol. Let me know your experiences down below in the comment section. For now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video dropping soon.